this weekend. Stay-at-home orders and other restrictions will be eased or lifted in at least 21 states, affecting roughly 116 million Americans. Here are a few states that we're keeping an eye on. Today, Georgia will lift a statewide shelter-in-place order for most of its 10.6 million residents. The order requires elderly and medically fragile residents to shelter in place until June 12th. Connecticut is moving forward with its first step in a gradual, multi-stage process of lifting restrictions on businesses and activities. The rollback is expected to begin on May 20th, which would allow outdoor dining at restaurants. On Monday, Florida will ease restrictions statewide, but will keep the 3 largest counties closed. And in California, state leaders are closing beaches after they were packed over the weekend, despite social distancing orders. Dr. Anthony Fauci is warning to states that are beginning to reopen their economies, but do not yet have the ability to do contract tracing. Take a listen to his warning.
The only thing I could do is from 40,000 feet, just continue to urge the ones who don't have that capability to really go very slowly. And those that do, go ahead and go by the guidelines. The guidelines are very, very explicit and very clear. There's a lot of leeway because we give the governors the opportunity to be very flexible, but you have to have the core principles of the guidelines. You can't just leap over things and get into a situation where you're really tempting a rebound. That's the thing I get concerned about. I hope they don't do that.
So Joe and Willie, Dr. Fauci again stressed that states should follow federal guidelines and only reopen if they have a 2-week decline in coronavirus cases and the ability to identify, isolate, and contact trace people who test positive. That doesn't seem like we have that.
Well, no, we don't. And Willie, that's the madness of all these protests. We saw one in Michigan yesterday where people were carrying around military-style weapons and trying to intimidate legislators. It's pretty surprising that laws allow them to carry weapons around like that in the state legislature, but that'll be another issue for another time. But what's so fascinating is that all these governors are doing, if you really look at it, is they're following White House guidelines. It was Donald Trump who announced the guidelines from the White House last week. And as Dr. Fauci has said, if they will follow the White House guidelines that Donald Trump put out there before he started darting around wildly, then states would have a much better chance of being able to be ensured that when they reopen business, those businesses could stay open and their emergency rooms wouldn't be slammed.
Yeah, and the state of Georgia has gotten a lot of attention for opening itself up last week. That opens up even wider today. But it's not just Georgia. It's not just Florida that's beginning to step in as well. It's, as Mika mentioned, places like Connecticut and Colorado are looking at reopening. But as you say, none of the states meet the full guidelines, the gating, as the White House put it, to take this next phase, to make this big leap. There's no contact tracing on a scale that would be required to actually keep track of all the people who have coronavirus and isolate all those people. But you're right, the governors have gotten mixed messages. He says liberate the state of Michigan. On the other hand, he says he, quote, totally disagrees with Governor Kemp opening the state of Georgia.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.